Yes, I got my cheaters on, and yes, we're going to start on page 70. As though she'd been conjured from the firelight, Kat stood in the corner of the circle, eyes closed, face tilted toward the stars, lips parted in pleasure, arms outstretched, palms to the fire. She looked like a nature goddess with her red hair swirling softly around her face. Darn, Jordan's gut clenched. She was some kind of beautiful, and that could drive a man crazy. Good thing he had a lifetime of experience dealing with crazy, and he knew how to steel himself against it. Jordan walked toward her until he was so close he could reach out an arm and touch her. Not that he would. Kat opened her eyes and let out a startled gasp. She stumbled backward until the back of her knees hit a fallen log, and she sat down hard. "You scared me," she said in accusation. Jordan set the beer and paper bag on the ground and stared down at her. "I apologize," he said, "but I'm not the one intruding." He sounded harsh, but he couldn't stop himself. Why was he always confronted around her? Maybe because it was easier to keep her at arm's length. She was the kind of woman a man could lose himself in, and that was the last thing he needed. Page 70-71. Kat tried to smooth her wild hair with both hands, but it was no use. The mop of her curls sprang back as soon as she could let go, surrounding her like a fiery halo. Jordan had the sudden urge to reach out and touch it. Instead, he turned away and unhooked a can of beer from the six-pack. "What are you doing out here?" she asked. He sat on the ground with his back against the log, thinking. Without looking at her, he unhooked another can of beer and held it out. She took it and sat on the fallen log. "I like the way you think." They sat in silence and for a while before he said, "What are you doing out here?" "Taking Hank and Waffles for a walk." As if she planned it, Hank trotted up to the campfire with Waffles trailing behind. The donkey took one look at Jordan and stayed out of the circle of light. How did you guys get out of the paddock?" Kat asked her dog. Hank touched his nose to her hand and then went over to investigate Jordan's shoe. Jordan watched the tiny dogs tug at the shoelaces. "The latch on the fence was broken," he said, taking another swig of beer. "Do you always bring your four-legged friends with you on midnight strolls?" Kat scoffed. "It's hardly midnight, and yes, as a matter of fact, I do take my animals with me whenever I can. I find that their company is to be more pleasing than the alternative." Jordan searched the shadows and behind Kat. "Your donkey friend doesn't seem pleased." Page 72. "He's scared of you because he thinks you don't care about him." Jordan frowned. "I don't not care about him. I never actually think about him that much." Kat shook her head in resignation. "Apathy. That's even worse." Jordan's lips twitched. She had the oddest way of simultaneously annoying him and amusing him. "He's a donkey. What am I supposed to do? Read him bedtime stories and tie ribbons in his hair?" She had seemed to consider it for a moment. "I don't think he'd care about ribbons, but he'd be open to the bedtime stories." Jordan shook his head. "You're very weird," Kat said, and she slid off the log and sat cross-legged beside him, staring up at the stars. "I know. I also don't care. I've spent far too many years of my life caring about what other people think. This time I'm going to be just me." She took another sip of her beer. "I was going to say that you're very imaginative." Jordan regarded her thoughtfully. The firelight cast a warm glow over her heart-shaped face, accentuating her high cheekbones and her sweet curve of her lips. She was like some beautiful mystery he very much wanted to solve. "What do you mean, quote, 'this time you're going to be yourself'? When weren't you?" Kat stared into the flames. Jordan didn't press her. Instead, he lifted a long, slender stick and pulled out a pocket knife. With a slow, methodical stroke, he began stripping the bark from the stick. "What are you doing?" Kat asked. "Something very important." He focused on the stick. "It's a tradition I started back when I was a kid. I could tell you." He lifted the stick, considering it all angles, then began scraping more bark, or I could just stare mysteriously into the fire. I haven't decided yet. Page 73. "I'm not trying to be mysterious," she said, "and yet I am mystified." He kept scraping the bark from the stick, not making eye contact. "It's not all that interesting," she insisted. Jordan felt a surge of triumph. "Tell me anyway." "My life back in L.A. was a lot different. It was noisier, and there was always something going on." She paused. "And I had a boyfriend." He studied the stick and continued scraping. "I had a boyfriend," she repeated, "who was all wrong for me. He was really into partying, and He had lots of friends and connections, so we were obligated to go places, fancy places, that all required all sorts of preparation. Jordan frowned. What kind of preparation? The kind you need for L.A. party scene. You always had to worry about what to wear, what to say, what not to say, where's the hottest place to be seen, and all that. And all it changed so fast. It was mercurial. One second you could be cooler than an iceberg in Alaska, and the next, she snapped her fingers, no one wants to know you. She took another sip of her beer, and after a while I just went through the motions and forgot who I really was. I just got swept up into this crowd, and I didn't even particularly like, and that became my life. Until he wondered what it took to bring her from that lifestyle to this one. It was a big change. She set her beer down and held her hands out toward the fire until one day I was supposed to go to this fancy event, so I borrowed a dress from one of my friends the night of the party. We were getting ready to leave, and he found out that I borrowed it. So he got mad, and he said that I would be embarrassed him if I wore recycled clothing to a photographed event. And I said I didn't care, and we argued. She acted like it was no big deal, but Jordan could tell it was a memory she didn't want to think about. He had a lot of those. He told me to go change, but something snapped inside me. I refused, and then he said he'd be better off without me, and that was it. So then you left him, Jordan conversationally, trying to keep his tone light for her sake, but not before grabbing him by the throat and choking him with one of his own bow ties. Kat gave a weak smile. So what happened? Jordan asked. Timing was on my side, she said. I just got offered a summer job on a houseboat reality show, taking care of that little guy. She pointed her finger at Hank, who was now sniffing at the brown paper bag. So I took the job, and I never looked back. And a woman on the house show used Hank as an arm charm, but she didn't really care about him when the job ended, so did her interest in Hank, so I took him with me. Hank heard his name and zipped over to Kat, wagging his tail. She picked him up and snuggled him close, staring into the fire. And that's when you decided to stay here? Jordan asked. I thought that was a good place as any to start over, and I've been wanting to leave L.A. behind for a long time. I just didn't have the opportunity, I guess. Jordan waited for her to say more, but she didn't. It sounds like you did the right thing, he said quietly, for yourself and for Hank. The way she looked at him with the firelight glancing off of the brilliant hair highlights her delicate, heart-shaped face. That was page 74. This is 75. She was so damn alluring, any man would be an idiot to let her go. Her ex-boyfriend had been a fool. A snuffling grunt came from behind Kat's right shoulder. The donkey had grown a little bolder, moving closer to Kat. Waffles, Jordan wants to be your friend, Kat said. Don't you want to come and say hello? The donkey brayed and trotted away. She turned back to Jordan. I guess he's being cautious. You should make the first move next time. Give him a little treat. Jordan gave her a dubious look. I'm not into the habit of carrying treats around for barn animals. Maybe you should try it, Kat said. He finished whittling the stick and set it beside him. So, Kat asked, are you going to tell me what you're doing with that stick? Jordan opened the paper bag his grandmother had given him and then pulled out a bag of marshmallows and opened it. Kat's jaw dropped. You're kidding me. Jordan speared 2 marshmallows on the end of the stick, then leaned forward and held them over the fire. Roasting marshmallows out here by yourself? Kat said, incredulous. It was the type of thing a person did at summer camp with a group of friends. When were you 12? I'm not by myself. Jordan glanced at her sideways. You're here, and so are 2 of your closest friends. Jordan handed her stick and then pulled out a package of graham crackers and a bar of chocolate. Oh, what? Kat blurted. You're making s'mores now? She couldn't believe it, that this guy had actually did this by himself. No guy ever knew. You don't have to have one if you don't want one, he said, pulling out a graham cracker, breaking off a piece of chocolate. She looked at him like he was crazy. Of course I'm going to want one, but this is just so weird. Not any weirder than you talking to wild crows, he said pointedly. Heat crept up the back of her neck. He had a point. But still, I don't know any single person who builds a campfire and makes s'mores by themselves. It just doesn't seem right. This is page 76. He gave her a level stare. S'mores are always right. Then he scooped a melted marshmallow onto a graham cracker square, added chocolate, and handed it to her. She took it mechanically, staring at him. Shouldn't you be doing this with sleeping bags and friends and singing Kumbaya or something? I wasn't planning on spending the night out here, he paused, giving her a sideways look that sent a shiver of excitement through her. In the firelight his eyes were so golden, ever more reminding her of a wolf. The thin, silvery scar on his cheek just added to the wildness. But if you really want to, I could go grab camping gear and get my guitar. You play guitar? A ripple of pleasure washed over her at the idea of him strumming away in front of a fire. She should have shoved the idea aside, focusing instead on another bite of chocolatey melted marshmallow heaven. Sure, the whole scenario tonight was a little surprising, but so what? Nothing special about a guy who played guitar, roasted marshmallows over secret campfires. Nothing sexy either. Nope. I do, he admitted, but it's been a while. Page 77. Kat's fascination with Mr. Mysterious was beginning to escalate, and that was not good. So he had some hidden talents. Lots of guys did. She fought to ignore the warmth blooming inside her at the nearness of him. For long moments they ate in companionable silence, staring into the flames. Waffles eventually grew bolder and wandered closer to the campfire. The faint sound of the crickets melded with the sound of the breeze whispering through the tall grass. Kat was lulled into a deep sense of contentment. The warm fire, the s'mores, the stars overhead, the odd feeling of companionship with a person she barely knew. I've never done this, she mused. Had s'mores with a beer and a donkey in the middle of the night? He speared another marshmallow with a stick and held it over the fire. Me neither. No, this, she gestured to the campfire, the whole camping thing. I mean, I know we're not camping, but still. He studied her for a moment. You grew up in California and never went camping? A twinge of alarm gripped her. She didn't usually talk about her past. I grew up in a big city with lots of things to do, but I just never got around to camping, I guess. She searched for something to say to steer the conversation in another direction. But it does seem odd to me. You're out here by yourself making s'mores. I mean, who does that? My grandmother's idea, he said. Still, when I was a kid, she and my grandfather would sneak out over late at night, and we would come out here on my birthday. Kat suddenly didn't feel like teasing him anymore. It's your birthday? Jordan gave him half a shrug. Just a dumb tradition. Page 78. An old sense of melancholy washed over her. I don't think it's dumb. I think it's pretty wonderful you had grandparents like that. He didn't respond. Why'd they have to sneak out late at night? Kat asked. He stared out into the fire for long moments. My parents didn't get along with them, so I rarely saw them. Oh, Kat didn't know what to say. Usually it was her story that rendered people at a loss. Well, she said as brightly as possible, I like your family tradition. Not my family's, just mine. My grandparents started it when I was a kid, but over the years they stopped coming because my grandfather couldn't drive at night. Some of the warmth from the firelight seemed to ebb away. So you celebrated your birthday out here by yourself? He took another sip of his beer and gave her a quizzical look. Don't look so distraught. It wasn't that big of a deal. My parents were what they like to call, quote, free, in quote, spirits. They didn't celebrate birthdays or holidays very often. But why? Kat asked. Was it a religious thing or something? It didn't make any sense. If Kat had a family, she'd make birthdays the most important thing in the world. Because that would have required them to be responsible and dependable, Jordan said casually. He appeared not to care, but Kat wasn't fooled. It would have required them to pay attention to the calendar dates and conform to societal rules, which that they shunned. This farm was their grand hippie idea to live off the land, except they never actually worked the land, so things were always falling apart. Kat's heart squeezed as she thought of Jordan's as a small boy living in such neglect. She finally understood a little bit why he was so closed off. Growing up with uncertainty made him a person of cautious. They had more in common than she realized. How long have you lived here? She asked. I don't live here, thank God, he said firmly. I live in Manhattan. I've taken a couple months off from my business to help my grandmother and help fix up this house. Then I'm heading back as soon as that's done. Now it all made sense. I know you didn't look like a lavender farmer, so that's your plan. Fix up the family house, sell it, and then go back to New York? I'm not staying out here one more moment longer than necessary. The marshmallows fell into the fire, and he tossed the stick in after him. A muscle clenched in his jaw as if he were steeling himself with resolve. Kat knew that look because she felt it herself. She rallied for his sake. Well, I'm happy. I stumbled upon you and your secret birthday tradition. Waffles snuffled her hair and she laughed, swatting him away. The miniature donkey eyed Jordan, or more precisely, he eyed the graham cracker. He took a tentative step toward him. Now's your chance, Kat said with a stage whisper. Just give him one and you'll be his friend for life. Jordan shook his head, but he dug into the box and pulled out a broken square. Waffles tilted his nose and sniffed in the air, but he didn't step closer. "Just ask him to come closer," Cat urged. Jordan shot her a skeptical look. "Ask him? Just like that?" "Sure, ask him. I talk to animals all the time. It's the best way to befriend them." "I'll pass." That was page 79. Cat didn't know who was more stubborn, Jordan or the donkey. Page 80. "Okay, then, but maybe you should put the graham cracker in between us since he's more comfortable with me." Jordan surprised her by scooting closer. Her cheeks grew warm, and it had nothing to do with the fire and everything to do with Jordan. Sitting close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, Waffles backed away, standing just outside the circle of light. Cat crooned to the skittish animal and then called him closer. She was peering into the dark, but she could feel Jordan watching her. Waffles slowly moved forward until he was within an arm's length of them. "That's it," Cat said. "Look what Jordan has for you. He brought them all the way out here just for you because he wants to be friends." She stole a quick glance at Jordan. He gave her a skeptical look. She almost laughed, but she didn't want to startle the little donkey. Waffles waited a few more moments, then finally stretched his neck, plucked the graham cracker from Jordan's hand, and trotted away. The sound of contented crunching could be heard beyond the circle light. "That's a win," Cat said happily. "I think there's hope for you yet." He seemed pleased in spite of himself. When his warm gaze lowered to her mouth, Cat suddenly felt as though everything was slowed to a halt. She tried to remember all the stuff about living on her own life and focusing on what she wanted, except for the only thing she wanted right now was to lean closer and see what happened next. Would it be so bad? Just a simple, no-big-deal kiss. Maybe she should just go for it. Inside her, the queen of impulsive decision sat bolt upright and amid her bed of stirring butterflies and nodded her head emphatically. Jordan shifted slightly, and his broad shoulder touched hers. That was page 80-81. Awareness washed over her, and she took a shaky breath. Maybe they could just kiss this one time, and then it would be out of the way, done, a funny moment she could laugh about later. Jordan's expression grew more serious. Neither of them were smiling anymore. Cat knew with sudden certainty there was no part of kissing him that would be a laughing matter. Very slowly he began to lean closer, her mouth open with a tiny inhale. Was this kiss actually happening? She exhaled softly as he tilted her face. Maybe just this once. Suddenly Jordan stiffened and bumped into her. Their faces mashed together awkwardly, and he cursed, bracing a hard hand against the log. He spun around. "What the—" Waffles brayed once, and then Jordan's back again with his nose. Cat stared wide-eyed at the donkey, who was now wedging his head between them, searching for more treats. The tension building inside her released in a form of a giggle, then another. She took one look at Jordan's disgruntled expression and just couldn't stop. He leaned back against the fallen log with a heavy sigh. "I think you have a new best friend," Cat managed. "He's not scared of you anymore." "Lucky me." "It's a good thing," she insisted. "Right." He reached for the box of graham crackers and pulled one out. "Here, you greedy beast." Waffles took the treat and instead of leaving, stayed right where he was, crunching the snack in Jordan's face and dusting the crumbs off his lap. Page 82. "Admit it," Cat said in a voice tinged with laughter. "You're glad we showed up to help celebrate your birthday." "It's debatable," he said gently, pushed Waffles to the side and rose to throw another log on the fire. "Oh, come on," Cat teased. "At least we're not boring. Think of us as a fabulous, unexpected birthday surprise." A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "You're unexpected, I'll say that." And he rose to throw another log on the fire. When he was finished, he settled back down on the ground a few feet away like before. Okay, Cat took another sip of her beer. So the kissing window of opportunity was now firmly slammed shut. She felt a stab of disappointment, but she refused to let it linger. What the heck was wrong with her? She should be sighing with relief that they didn't kiss. It would be just another made things awkward. He'd be heading back to New York City soon, and she'd be settling into her new home here, and that was it. It was better this way. Jordan was sitting with his back propped against the log, one leg drawn up, a forearm resting on his knee, and as he stared into the fire, even relaxed as he was, he exuded a sort of wild, tightly coiled energy that made her want to crawl over there and just lay her hands on him to see if it would resonate through her bones. She tore her gaze away and gave herself a quick mental shake. Get a grip. She knew better than to get all dreamy-eyed over someone like him. Most of her past relationships with men were tumultuous. whirlwind affairs, burning hot and bright in the beginning and then dying out faster than a candle in a windstorm. That's probably all this was, a frivolous interest in him because he was new and mysterious, better to get recognized now before she let herself get swept away. Hugging her knees to her chest, she tipped her head back and let out a heavy sigh. Somehow, as much as she wanted to believe Jordan Prescott was no big deal, she just couldn't quite make that stretch. There were a lot of uncertainties in her life since she moved to Pine Cove Island, but one thing was clear, as starry as the sky above. If she had kissed Jordan, it would not have been something that she could just easily forget. A person just doesn't slide up and kiss a wild animal without losing a piece of themselves in the process. And as alluring as this beast was, she couldn't risk it. And that's page 83. Moving forward. Oh, good. Page 88 is just one page. Kat said something to her date in a low, throaty murmur that made Jordan's skin prickle in awareness, and blood flow in his heated rush through to his torso and lower. Christ, just the low pitch of her sulky voice made his body jerk to attention like a horny teenager. Jordan's grimaced and he set the menu down. He needed to get out of there. I'm not having any. Layla looked surprised at him. Really? But you love dessert. Kate stifled a laugh. It might have been just because of something her date was saying, but Jordan had the distinct feeling that she was laughing at him. Her date had reached across the table, pointing to a small scar on his hand. Kat studied it and traced the pad of the man's thumb with the tip of her finger. A sharp pang twisted inside him again, making him feel hot and irritable. What the hell was wrong with him? It couldn't be jealousy, except it damn well felt like it. He shifted uncomfortably on his chair. Why don't we go to that pie bar down on 7th Avenue? Lila brightened. Sure, I love that place. Jordan signaled for the waiter. He absolutely had no desire for pie or for the prolonging their dinner meeting, but he'd do anything to get out of that restaurant. The last thing he wanted to do was sit beside Kat Davenport while she fawned all over some other man. Not just because he was jealous, of course, because it just wasn't any of his business, that's all. Okay. 95, 96, and 97. Before coming to the island, she never in a million years expected to find people like her. Her whole life seemed to be a series of moments where she was always searching for something, and now finally she found people telling her that she belonged. It was almost too good to be true. My grandmother's sister had animal magic, Emma said, but we don't know how much about her besides she left home when she was young, and my grandmother never saw her again. Let's figure this out, Juliet said. What about your family? What's your mom like? Kat braced herself for the empty ache that always accompanied that question. For some reason, it wasn't so bad this time. Maybe it was because she didn't feel entirely alone. I don't know, she said finally. She died when I was born, and I grew up in foster care. I'm sorry, Emma said softly. That can't have been easy. Kat shrugged. I was fine. It was a lie, but she had been saying it for so long it just slipped out of the tongue. Growing up the way she did had not been fine at all. It had been hard and lonely and sometimes heartbreaking. Why did people always say they were fine when they really weren't? Maybe it was because it was just easier than telling the truth. Then that settles it, Juliet said firmly. The Holloway house already claimed you as family, so you belong with us. Emma placed her hand on Kat's. Our family might seem a little crazy, but we're loyal. There's got to be a way to figure out where you came from, Juliet added. We have about 1,000,000 dusty trunks up in the attic we can go through. To start, maybe there'll be a clue. There was suddenly an ache in Kat's throat. She couldn't speak around these women were so ready to accept her into their lives, and they barely knew her. A long time ago, Kat had decided that these animals were her only family, since she didn't have the luxury of having anyone else. But now, sitting between these two amazing women, Kat felt as though the world she knew had only begun to shift, and that she had no idea how to navigate around it. Okay. Let me see why I marked this one and how far it goes. I honestly don't know why I marked page 103. Okay. Oh, she used to wonder about her real parents, and when she did that, she wondered if they loved each other. Did her mother have the ability to communicate with animals too? Did Kat used to pretend her mother had been just like her, so she felt less like a freak of nature? But as she grew older, she stopped thinking about who her parents might have been. Why bother? Pretending and wishing for that kind of stuff never changed anything. She decided to create her life she wanted without them. And yet, the image of Juliet and Emma's joyful, smiling faces sprang into her mind. They seemed so sure that she was part of their family. Their happiness made Kat wish it was true. Are they her family? We'll find out in the book. That was page 103, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111. Yeah, we're going to be here a little bit. Kat's concern for Clementine and the kittens quickly escalated into frustration, then annoyance. She stepped into the broom closet and gripped the edge of the box he was holding. You have an entire house at your disposal. There are other rooms upstairs. Can you just show a little patience? Patience? He gave her an incredulous look, tugged the box out of her hand, and set it on the shelf outside of her reach. Ever since you moved in here, you've been testing my patience. You weren't even living here, but before you insisted I build a new coop for the chickens. Then you bring your dog in the house without asking. You sneak a pregnant cat into the house and sign my grandmother up as a pet volunteer. You intrude on my campfire. Oh, I intruded. Kat jammed her hands on her hips, angry at the heat flooding her face. You didn't seem so eager to have me leave when you handed me a beer and we made s'mores together. For several heated seconds they stared at each other as if they were both remembering that moment in front of the fire where they had almost kissed. Jordan leaned toward her, his broad shoulders blocking her view of the shelves behind him. And now today, he said sulkily, you and your animals have taken over my bedroom. He was standing so close that Kat could practically feel her heart thumping against her rib cage. It's just one cat and a few kittens, she managed. I'm sure you can survive a couple of days. He cocked his head, studying her as if he was trying to decide what to do with her. I shouldn't have to survive. I should be able to sleep in my bed tonight. This is your fault. It's not like I planned for this to happen, Kat said in exasperation. I'm not the one who chose your bed. Something changed in the air between them, a languid, sensual shift that prickled the hairs on the back of her neck. If you had chosen my bed, he murmured, a wicked glint in his eyes, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Kat swallowed hard. The closet suddenly seemed to grow smaller and warmer. Or was that the heat coming from him? He was so big, looming over her like some gorgeous avenging angel about to demand surrender, and he smelled divine, woodsy, and fresh, like evergreens in the sunlight. She wanted to grab a fistful of his shirt, yank him closer, and breathe him in. The queen of impulsive decisions let out a tickling laugh. Kat licked her lips nervously. Jordan's heavy-lidded gaze dropped to her mouth. Forget it, she whispered. His mouth kicked up at one corner. I didn't say anything. I'm not kissing you, so just forget it. Kat was trying to act calm and cool, but her voice sounded too breathy. He lifted a brow in sensual amusement. I was going to say something else, but now that you mention kissing. Kat's face flushed with heat. She lowered her head and feigned a sudden interest in the floor tiles. Fascinating shade of beige, those. Never mind. What were you going to say? No more animals. Her head snapped up. What? His expression was stern, which should have done something to alleviate the crazy animal attraction she was feeling, but it just seemed to enhance it. I'll let the cats stay where they are for 2 days, but don't bring anything else home. I'm trying to fix this house up and get it ready to sell. I can't keep tripping over your animals. There's no room. There's plenty of room. She tilted her head back to glare at him, but it was too hard to look down on someone when the top of your head barely reached their shoulders. We're on a farm with hardly any animals. If you haven't noticed, even the paddock is empty. Don't bring any more pets home, Kat. I mean it. She thought for all the unwanted animals that would be coming through the shelter and all the unused space on the farm. Why was he being so difficult? He was leaving soon anyway. It shouldn't matter to him if there was some extra animals around. She gathered her courage. No. He jerked his chin back slightly in surprise. No. You heard me. I can't promise that. She tried to appear nonchalant, but it almost seemed impossible when he was standing too close. All she had to do was rise up on her tiptoes, and it would be so easy to press her lips against the hollow at the base of his neck to find out if it was warm and smooth and looked... Focus! Kat swallowed hard. Opal said she'd volunteer for any other animals who might need homes, and this is her house, too. He lazily braced his hands on the shelf behind her head. You're telling me that you're willingly going to ignore my request? Yep. I am so glad you said that. His voice was deeply satisfied, like a purr of a jungle cat. All Kat's nerves ending went on high alert. She glanced up sharply. Why? because it's settled. And now that we can go with your idea in one swift move. Jordan leaned down and brushed his lips over hers. Kat stood frozen in the moment, aware of nothing but his warm, soft caress of his mouth, the rasp of his flannel shirt against her bare arms, the crisp scent of pine soap and warm male skin. His kiss was subtle and yet insistent, coaxing, intoxicating. Heat bloomed inside her, spiraling out of in every direction like a sensual drug too powerful to resist. She slid her hands around his neck and pressed closer. A low growl came from Jordan's throat. He drew back against his muscular body, holding her to him as he deepened the kiss. Kat dug her fingernails through his hair, glorying in the rich, silky feel of it, and slow, sweet glide of his tongue on ongoing wave of pure, delicious sensation ripped over her. One kiss was barely over, and the next one began. When Jordan slid a warm, large hand around her back of her t-shirt to caress her bare skin, she let out a tiny gasp of pleasure. He pulled her slightly to the tip of her tongue, darting out to lick the lower lip as if she could taste the pleasure on his mouth. Kat's knees went weak. This was the madness. She knew it. But she couldn't just bring herself to care. All rational thoughts seemed to slip away like wispy clouds on a stiff breeze, until the only things left that were hot, bright taste of him, and the feel of left his powerful arms around her, and the thudding beat of her heart. In that moment, only one thing was achingly clear. Jordan Prescott knew how to kiss. Okay. Page 115, 16, 17, and 18. Juliet grinned and leaned back on her hand. So tell me about Mr. Mysterious. Kat rubbed her face with a groan. I'm avoiding him. Clearly, Juliet said, but why? Is living here that bad? No, it's fine. The barn animals are easy to care for, and Hank enjoys the space to run around. And Opal's been great. She's even been a volunteer at the rescue shelter. It's Jordan, then. Juliet studied Kat slowly. He's your problem. Yes, Kat said with a sigh. She ran her hand through her hair, shaking out a mass of curls. We got into a big argument today because I brought the pregnant cat home and she just had kittens. Juliet's face lit up. Oh, how sweet. I want to see them. I love cats. It's not sweet to him. Kat had a flashback of Jordan's face when he pointed to Clementine. She had kittens in his bed and apparently he's allergic to cats. Pfft, Juliet said, waving a hand. That's an easy fix. Kat wrinkled her nose. I don't know. He's pretty upset. No, I mean the allergies. I just made a fresh batch of herbal remedies to bring the florist shop, and I have one of the specifically for the allergies. They're in my car. I'll give you a vial for him. Kat looked hopefully at Juliet. Will it work? Of course, all my herbal portions work, but they're even more powerful if the person has the desire for it to work. For example, if Jordan really likes the cat and wants it to stick around, the remedy will work even better. Does he like her now? Not from the looks of it, Kat said glumly. Jordan didn't seem interested in Clementine at all, but it could be worth a try. Is that the only reason you're avoiding him, because he's unhappy about the cat having kittens in his bed? Not exactly. Kat's gaze slid away. She plucked at a loose thread on the hem of her t-shirt. He annoys me other times. We sort of rub each other the wrong way, but for the most part it's working out okay. So, Juliet tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, you get him to take my allergy remedy and problem solved. The problem isn't him, it's me, Kat said in resignation. I'm the queen of impulsive decisions. Juliet laughed and drew her knees up, hugging herself. Yet another reason for me to love you. We have a lot in common. Kat sighed. When I made the decision to move here, I promised myself that I would stick to the plan, make a life here, and that's on my own terms, figure out what makes me happy and not get sidetracked. And you're getting sidetracked, Juliet asked with the barest of a hint of a smile. All right, here's the thing, Kat said in a rush. Jordan just kissed me and I kissed him back. Juliet grinned. And I call that sidetracked. How did that happen? Kat filled her in on the Clementine Jordan's order not to bring any more animals home. So then I told him no, Kat said, and then he said okay, and kissed me in the broom closet, and now I'm all weirded out because what's up? That's not part of my plan. How am I supposed to go on like nothing happened? Well, did you like it? Did kissing him make you happy? For a scant few seconds, Kat considered it. I'm not sure happy is the right way to describe it. Scorching hot kiss in the dark broom closet with an enchanted prince made her feel all sorts of things. Wild, inhibited, sexy as sin. Happy was not high on that list. But she still felt a little giddy when she thought about it. The heat of his hands on her back that pulled her against him, the way she melted into him and kissed him back, completely uninhibited. The walls could have crumbled down around them and she wouldn't have even noticed. Kissing Jordan Prescott had taken all her focus, and liked it. She did. Way too much. If you didn't like it, then that's easy, Juliet said. All you have to do is... I never said that I didn't like it. Kat stood and paced to the little window. I'm just not sure what to do now. I say you go on about your business and just let things unfold as they will, Juliet said, standing there. You've got the upper hand here, and you get to decide where you want to go with this. Nowhere, Kat said firmly. It's not going anywhere because I'm not going to kiss him again. Besides, he's heading back to New York City as soon as possible. He's not even planning on staying here, and I am. Okay, you aren't going to kiss him again. So that's that. Now all you have to do is be civil when you run into each other. A memory flashed through Kat's mind. Jordan's teeth tugging gently at the bottom lip of hers while his large hand slid up her thigh. Nothing civil about that. Juliet took in the simple, empty room again. I hate to break it to you, but you've got a bigger problem. This room has lost its will to live. You need to decorate stat. It's fine. Kat leaned against the small table. I get paid Friday, so I'm going shopping. Good, Juliet said, but I'm still going to help you with this. She waved her hand in the air. Jail cell of yours? I won't be here that long anyway, Kat insisted. It's only a month-to-month thing, so I'm not planning on doing a lot of decorating. Are you planning on doing a lot of sleep? You need a bed at the very least, unless there's a bed in the farmhouse you're thinking about hijacking. Juliet gave Kat a sly grin. It's late. My lips are getting tongue-tied. Kat rolled her eyes. Clementine the cat had already taken Jordan's bed, remember? Who said anything about Jordan's bed? Juliet said innocently. I was thinking that you might have a spare room but I see where your mind is going with this. Kat wanted to contradict her, but everything she said was true. She was going to be thinking a lot about him, whether she wanted to or not. The big test would be whether or not she could keep him at arm's length. The old cat would have had no problem getting all wild and crazy with him, but she was not going to be that person. Not anymore. This time she was going to do things on her own terms, without the distraction of someone else's influencing her choices. She owed it to herself to at least try. Next paperclip. 128 and 129. Jordan glanced around the apartment, noticing everything. The small suitcase pushed up against the wall, the cardboard box of clothes beside the suitcase, the table near the window with a butterfly cage on top. There was a single loaf of bread and a small jar of peanut butter on the table. Aside from those things, there was nothing else. She has nothing else. Guilt roiled inside him. He was living in a house full of furniture. The upstairs rooms were crammed with things nobody used, and here she was living like this. He should have known. He should have thought to check. Why don't you have a bed? He asked her, aware of the rough edges to his voice. The woman turned him upside down and inside out. Because I like to live like a Spartan. I'm a minimalist. Jordan took a last look around the room as she ushered him out. Spartan my butt. She was broke, and he knew it. If there was one thing he understood, it was bravado. He mastered it a long time ago, always pretending things weren't that bad. Pretending he wore outdated, ill-fitting clothing as a kid because he wanted to, not because he had to. Pretending he wasn't hungry at lunchtime because there was no food in the fridge that week. Growing up hadn't been easy, and he had learned how to build walls around himself for protection. He knew walls when he saw them, and Kat had a rock-solid, steel-beamed, impenetrable kind. The kind that kept most people conveniently at a distance. But he wasn't most people. Moving on. 134. She could think of certain someone who would beg to differ, especially once he found out about the new goat and the dog. But she wouldn't worry about that until later. When it came to animals in need, they had to come first. Kat clearly remembered what it was like to feel different, flawed, growing up. That bone-deep belief that she wasn't good enough and nobody really wanted her. It wasn't something that just went away. Heck, even now that she was an adult, the wounded feeling remained. It was just buried over the years. An experience like a piece of shrapnel in the body, surrounded by layers of scar tissue. Life went on, and sure, it would hurt occasionally, but it just became a part of who she was. But her love of animals was more than bone deep. It was part of her soul. She'd do anything she could to help them, especially the needy ones that nobody wanted. This was her calling. She wasn't going to let them down. Okay. Page 143. You seem pretty fond of Clementine, Kat said. Jordan looked bored. No, I'm not, says the guy who tucked his sweatshirt into the cardboard box for her. To make it more comfortable for the kittens. I'm not heartless, but it doesn't mean I have feelings for your cat. says the guy who was now taking a seat beside the box to check on the purring Clementine. Kat smiled. What? Jordan asked. She shook her head, her smile widening. Nothing. Don't read into something that's not there, he warned. I was going to throw the sweatshirt out anyway. Okay, Kat agreed, not believing him for 1 second. She could tell he liked the kittens, and she could tell Clementine liked him. Did you know that your sweatshirt has the best thing that you could have given them? Why? Because it smells familiar to them. Clementine's kittens were in your bed, so lining the box with something that smells like you make them feel safe. Jordan didn't say anything. He just stroked the cat between the ears. Clementine's loud purr seemed to echo off the bathroom walls. Uh-huh, Kat said. I thought so. She's your cat? Jordan drew his hand away. No, she's your cat, and in case you're forgetting, I'm allergic. You're the one who foisted her on my grandmother. First of all, Kat said, I never foisted her on your grandmother. Opal officially volunteered. And second of all, you're not allergic anymore. Juliet's potion fixed that. And third of all, Clementine is not my cat. She's clearly chosen you. Ask her. Jordan threw her a look. No thanks. I'm telling you, Kat insisted. Felines are funny like that. Excuse me. All that talk about allergies. People don't really get a choice in the matter. If a cat chooses you, that's it. You're theirs forever. He cocked his head, studying her, and you know this for a fact. Look, there are a lot of things in this world I don't know, but I do know about animals, and this cat, she said, pointing at Clementine, wants you. His expression grew darkly sensual, and Kat was suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, with just the box between them. He slowly reached out and lifted a lock of her hair from her cheek, sliding it between his thumb and forefinger, watching the silky strands fall from his fingertips. What about this cat? What does she want? She opened her mouth and closed it. He was giving her that sinful look that said he knew what she wanted and he could give it to her. For a few crazy seconds, she almost lost her resolve to keep him at arm's length. Would it be so bad? Maybe just this one more kiss and then they would be finished with him for good, sort of like a goodbye kiss. Third time's a charm and all that. The queen of impulsive decision thought about it was a great idea. Jordan was still giving her that intense hungry wolf, waiting for an answer. The front door opened and Kat heard Opal, the grandmother, bustling through the door. Kat stood quietly. I've got to go. She walked through the kitchen and out the back door so she wouldn't have to make small talk with Opal. It would have been impossible to focus on the conversation with her mind in turmoil. Striding across the yard to the garage, she scolded herself the entire way. For a person who swore they were going to do things right this time, she was really making a mess of it. She had a good job, good friends, an island that felt kind of a place that she could be really happy. So why was she letting herself get all flustery over Jordan, who clearly didn't belong in her world? Here she was, fighting the attraction that seemed to grow stronger every time they crossed paths. She marched up the stairs to her apartment, vowing to put him out of her mind. He wasn't even that big of a deal, she told herself. Yesterday had been another stupid slip-up. He fixed her bathroom and she kissed him again. But could she really blame herself? He had a toolbox, and he was soaking wet, tool welding. Hot guys who fixed stuff were irresistible. Everyone knew that. And sure, he was nice to Clementine today, but so what? That didn't mean anything. Lots of guys were nice to animals. Kat pulled her keys from her pocket and locked the door. Let's face it, Jordan Prescott was just a passing fancy. He did nothing for her, and he did not enhance her life in any way. That was page 143, 144, and 145. I'm trying to get us to at least page 200. Page 151. Kat threw her hands up. There's a bunch of furniture in my apartment that doesn't belong to me. That's what's wrong. I know, he said, through a yawn. I put it there. But I didn't ask for it. None of it's mine. You needed it, he said simply, and I saw your apartment yesterday. No, you assumed I needed it, and you didn't bother to find out. You don't know enough about me to assume things, she began to pace. Maybe I'm already ordered furniture. Maybe I have a whole set of Chippendale antiques on the way from California as we speak. The point is, you put that stuff in there without asking me, and that's my private apartment. That's my personal space. Wait, the truth finally dawned on him. You're mad at me for furnishing the rental space? Yes, because you didn't even ask me if I wanted it. He frowned. Look, when I went to repair the shower this morning, it just seemed like a good idea. It's not that big of a deal. There are empty rooms upstairs in the farmhouse filled with mismatched furniture no one's using, so I brought some up. She came to stand above him, eyes glittering with some emotion that he couldn't catch. Why would you do something like that? What do you mean, why? I thought it would make you more comfortable. Like lining Clementine's box with your sweatshirt. Page 151, 152. Right? Her voice tinged with bitterness, like I'm an orphan who needs a handout. Ah, so that was the way of it. Jordan leaned his head back and studied her carefully. He needed to be very careful how he responded. No, that's not at all why I did it. Clearly, you don't need anyone's help. The tightness in Kat's expression eased. She straightened her spine. I don't. I know, he said, meaning it. From the moment they first met at the farmer's market, he always knew that she was strong and independent, a survivor like him. Why then, she asked in frustration, why would you go through all that trouble? I can't pay you back. He shook his head. I don't want your money. Kat's expression hardened. I'm not paying you back in any way, so if you think for 1 second that I'll... Hold on, he interrupted. Are you suggesting that I give you that stuff so you'd sleep with me? Surely she couldn't be thinking that. Oh, goodness. The idea of it was too ridiculous to even contemplate, and yet he watched her, the emotional flicker across her face. Goodness, my nose itches. It seemed she did. She looked away and muttered, maybe. Jordan's eyebrows shot up and he started to laugh, deep curling laughter that rose up from the chest and made his shoulders shake. Well? She glared at him. Well, what? How am I doing so far? Is it working? Because usually my thrift store reject furniture really gets the ladies ecstatic and excited. She wasn't amused. His humor died away and he studied her closely. Mouth tight, arms crossed, hugging herself. Well, heck. She was really bothered by what he had done. What kind of world did she come from? He heard the Hollywood crowd harbored a lot of shallow individuals, but for her to jump to the conclusion that he expected payment of any kind was just wrong. That was page 152, 153. My nose is just not giving me any reprieve. Look, Kat, he said softly, it's just some old stuff that was gathering dust. I'm glad that it's finally getting some use. Even so, it just makes me feel indebted. I don't like it. I don't want anyone's help. People don't just give me stuff unless they expect something in return, and that's how it has always been. That's how the world works. Not always, Jordan said. Sometimes people give you stuff to others just because they want to help. You do it all the time when I see you care for your animals. Do you expect anything from them? She swallowed visibly. No, but that's different. Why? Because I like them all, and I want to care about what happens to them. And it's so hard to believe that I might like you and care about you too. Her swift inhale wasn't lost on him. He surprised her. It's different, she blurted. I don't want to owe you anything. Don't you get that? It just complicates things between us. Kat, Jordan took a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair. Things are complicated between us already. We both know it. And none of these feelings that have anything to do with dusty old furniture. Her eyes grew glossy and she glanced away quickly, wringing her hands. Hey, Jordan's chest clenched. He hated seeing her upset. He started to stand. She surprised him by dropping onto the grass, hugging up her knees to her chest and staring at the stem. Hey, he repeated, softly moving to sit close enough that the shoulders were almost touching. If you don't want the furniture, it's okay. My grandmother always meant for that to be a furnished rental. It's my fault for not paying any closer attention and making sure that it was furnished before you moved in. Can you just use the stuff until you find stuff better, or when your shipment of Chippendale furniture comes in from California? She threw him a look, and they both knew there was no shipment. I mean, you're going to have to weigh the pros and the cons, he continued, and I don't envy you that hard decision. Are you going to want fancy, meticulously crafted antique furniture, or Goodwill rejects from broken-down old farmhouse? Tough choice, I know. A reluctant smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Jordan felt a tightness in his chest ease, like heavy bands of rope loosening with each breath. He nudged her with his shoulder. Just help me out here and keep the stuff for now, all right? If you don't, I'll never hear the end of it from my grandmother. All right. The strain slowly eased from her face. Fine. Relief washed over him. He felt as though he'd been hanging from a branch and just managed to hook his leg over it so he could regain balance. The strength of his reaction surprised him, but it didn't try to analyze it. He wanted her to be happy. He just liked when she was happy. I'll try to keep it until I get my own stuff, she said, but promise me something. He promised her anything if she kept smiling like that. What? She shoved him with both hands until they toppled onto the grass. A tangle of legs and arms. Kat pressed her hands into his chest and stared at him with those mesmerizing eyes. La Bedame sans merci, indeed. Never go into my apartment again without my permission, or I'll... She paused, as if searching for a dire consequence. Abandon me on a hillside and leave me to die? Jordan smiled softly at her, trying to ignore the delicious curve of her lips pressed against him. Or you'll what? She gasped in delight. I'll round up every pregnant cat I know and I'll find and release them into your bedroom. Easy there, wildcat, he chuckled softly. I don't plan on going into your apartment again. She seemed to accept that answer, except because she started to pull away, pulling off his chest. Unless, he lightly circled his hands around her waist to keep her close. She paused, narrowing her eyes. He tried to think fast. Unless there's a fire and Hank's in there. I mean, after all, he needs rescuing. She considered it for a moment. Fine. She started to pull away again, but he held on. What else could he say to keep her tightly like this? On top of him, he wasn't really ready to give her up, or unless there's an earthquake, that you're trapped underneath a treacherous lump of recliner and you need rescuing. Kat rolled her eyes. I think I could manage that on my own, thanks. True, but you need to conserve your strength because of the flood outside. She arched a brow and began to smile. It made her heart a flat line in his chest. God, he wanted her. Oh, there's a flood now. Yes, he rubbed his thumb slightly over the delicate skin and the inner wrist, wondering if she was this soft all over. He needed to find out. I'll be fine, she said impishly. I'm a good swimmer. I won't need your help. She started to jump, but he caught her round her waist and pulled her back down on top of him. Kat let out a little shriek of laughter. 154, 155, 156, 157, and 158. I don't think we're going to make it to 200, but we got a good chunk read tonight, so we'll call it quits tonight at 158. But who will steer the ark? He murmured against her ear. You know, the one I built to save all the animals. He could feel her chest vibrating with laughter. She slid her knees on the other side of his hips until she was straddling him. Jordan's throat went dry and the heat spiked through his veins. He suddenly knew exactly how poor knights in the painting felt, helpless to resist. Now you're just trying to sweet-talk me. Her voice was sweet, warm, and sliding over his skin. I might be, he said huskily. Is it working? She pushed against his chest and rose up. It might be. A bolt of lust thought shot through him, and he reflexively reached up to her, gripped her hips. You still haven't promised, she breathed. Promise me that you'll never enter my apartment again. Jordan had to work to find his voice. I promise I won't unless you ask me. And that I never will, so problem solved. He wanted to say her problem was far from solved because he had every intention of chipping away at her carefully constructed walls until she begged him to come inside. But how could he form coherent words when she was on top of him? Very slowly she leaned forward until her hair fell into a soft curtain around him and he could feel the warmth of her breath against his mouth. It was so everything that he could do just to hold still and let her go at her own pace. I think I might need to kiss you again, she whispered. Thank Christ, all systems were go, no argument there, except she'd better hurry or he'd kiss her first. She melted onto him like warm honey until every delicious curve of her body wrapped around him. Oh, and also I'm bringing home a friend for waffles next week. Somewhere deep down, Jordan knew that he should care. But holy hell, she could bring home the entire San Diego Zoo if she liked. She brushed her lips over his once, twice. The tip of her tongue darted out and licked his mouth like a cat lapping cream. And that was it. The mortal man could only take so much. Jordan gripped the small of her back and with one hand anchored her tightly against him, then slid her other arm around her and in one swift move rolled her until she was exactly where he needed her to be. Kat's eyes widened in surprise, hair fanning out on the grass. She lay beneath him. Then he reached up and wound her fingers around his neck, pulling her closely with a tiny exhale. He captured her mouth with his swallowing her sigh. Sweet hot damn. Her soft murmur of surrender just blew every shred of decency and control he had left. All the blood in his brain rushed lower, leaving him with only one coherent thought. Mine. He wanted her, and he wasn't going to waste any time trying to analyze that. Cat Davenport drove him crazy. But he'd not go there with an idiot smile on his face because there was no place he'd rather be. They kissed until they lost track of time. Minutes, hours, days, he didn't care. When he slid his hand up her thigh, dropping kisses along her neck and sucked on her pulse at the base of her throat, she made a soft mewing sound that almost killed him. She smelled like strawberries and vanilla, tasted like wild, sweet abandon, and he wanted all of her, every breath, every sigh, every whisper of need. He couldn't get enough. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Jordan recognized how screwed up he was because this woman was dangerous. She blew past all his barriers and made him forget reason and common sense. Yes, they were on the open field. Yes, he should have moved more control, but did he care? Not even a little. One word, one tiny whisper from her, and he'd give everything that he ever had if she let him. Okay. We're going to stop there tonight. That's a big hunk of book we conquered. Okay? I'm pretty proud of that. We've got that much left. And then you get a book number of do you think you should read it or not. Now, considering I marked up most of this book, shared most of this book with you, what do you think it's going to get? Probably a darn good rating. We are behind in book reviews. I didn't think I'd ever say that. I have Cowboy's Baby waiting on us. I have now started reading Big Sky Wedding. So it's going through like this, rapid wildfire. Anyway, that's all I've got for you tonight. Nothing else. I know, how unusual, right? Love y'all. Stay safe. Keep your social distance. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. You got this. Good night.